I've been in this moment before. When people say something can't be done, I know it can't be done, and it must be done.
Marco Rubio facing a crucial test next Tuesday in his backyard, his home state of Florida. A new poll out from Tampa television station Bay News 9 this morning showing Donald Trump with a 20-point lead over Marco Rubio in that state. And yesterday, controversy with CNN reporting that some of Rubio's campaign advisors, discouraged by his prospects in Florida, are talking about getting out of the race before primary day. Rubio's communications director, though, Alex Conant, called that report 100% false. And he joins me now. So good morning, Alex. We played a clip of that before going to the last break. And I just want to ask, again this morning, looking at this new polling out of Florida, you guys are still, your sense right now, you still think you can win and will win Florida next week. Is that right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we know that poll that you just referenced is not accurate. There was another poll by actually a respected pollster yesterday, the Monmouth poll, that had Marco closing fast on Donald Trump. It's a single-digit race. And more importantly, inside that poll, it showed that we're way ahead in the early vote. That tracked with other data that we've seen. Another poll that was released over the weekend. We know that Florida is going to be very, very close, but we feel really good about our place in the race there. Marco's drawing big crowds. The early vote, the absentee ballots are all tracking in a very favorable direction for us, and we have the momentum going into the final week. Look, Marco knows how to win in Florida. He's won as an underdog before in Florida. He beat Charlie Crist, a candidate that in many ways resembles Donald Trump. In Florida in 2010. We're confident we're going to win there, and when we do, it's going to be a new day on the campaign trail. We're going to have a lot more delegates, a lot more money, a lot more momentum, and a map that is very favorable for us moving forward.
So we showed, you had that CNN report yesterday. We had you pushing back against with Wolf Blitzer. We showed a clip of that. Then afterwards, you tweeted this. You tweeted this last night. You said, so CNN just canceled my previously scheduled interview on Anderson Cooper tonight. A lot of people reading between the lines there. Can you tell us more about that? Is it your sense that CNN, because of what happened yesterday with your objections to their report, are you suggesting they kicked you off the show because of that?
Look, I don't want to speak for CNN, obviously. All I can tell you is that I was scheduled to be on Anderson Cooper last night. It was a previously scheduled interview. When the first initial false report aired on Wolf Blitzer's show, I immediately contacted the network. Wolf was kind enough to have me on so I could respond and set the record straight in real time. And then about an hour or two later, Anderson Cooper's producers informed me that they would not be covering the story and that the segment had been canceled and canceled my interview as a result. Look, I think CNN has a lot of egg on its face. I don't know how a report made it on air without anybody actually checking with the campaign to see if there was any truth to it whatsoever. If they had, they would have known that the report was utter false. I think that CNN, the story is still on their website. I think that's a problem for them. I don't believe that they're continuing to report on it on air, but they certainly shouldn't have it on the website any longer because it's 100% false. And again, I don't know how a report makes it on the air of a major network like CNN without anyone checking with the campaign first. I know MSNBC, NBC News, other cable news networks would never allow something on air without at least checking with some sources at the campaign. But that's what happened at CNN yesterday. It was not a fine moment for them.
Well, let me ask you, too, about the other news this morning. We played earlier that robocall. Mitt Romney, the 2012 Republican candidate, recording a robocall on behalf of Marco Rubio, although also the Romney camp putting out the word that he'd be willing to do the same thing. He'd be willing to help out Ted Cruz and John Kasich, basically just not Donald Trump. Mitt Romney's involvement in this race right now, saying he's against Donald Trump, but not taking sides, not picking between the other three out there. Is that helping or hurting the cause of stopping Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's absolutely helping. I mean, look, we need to stop Donald Trump, and Mitt Romney's doing what he can to help it. We appreciate his support with those robocalls. I understand he's willing to do it for other campaigns, too, because he hasn't endorsed yet, but we certainly appreciate it in those key states. Look, I think if you live in Florida right now, the best way to stop Donald Trump, in fact, the only way you can stop Donald Trump is by going and voting for Marco Rubio. All of the polls show, all of the early voting shows that Marco is the only candidate that has a chance of beating Donald Trump in Florida. And Ted Cruz knows that. That's why he's trying that's probably why he's trying to undermine our campaign there. You just had a report saying that he was doing things in Florida. We've seen no evidence of Ted Cruz campaigning in Florida. He has no plans to go to Florida. At least he hasn't announced any plans to go to Florida other than for the debate. And in Hawaii, we're seeing some dirty tricks by the Ted Cruz campaign. That CNN report you just referenced that we know is false. The Ted Cruz campaign sent that report to their supporters in Hawaii yesterday, to some of our supporters in Hawaii yesterday, suggesting that Marco was getting out of the race. It's the exact same thing that Ted Cruz did to Ben Carson in Iowa. There's no place for that in Republican politics. It's evidence that Ted Cruz is willing to do or say anything. He's not being honest about what he's doing in Florida. He's not being honest to Republican primary voters and or caucus goers in Hawaii today. It's an unfortunate state of the campaign.
Yeah, Alex, so you're mentioning Florida, and yeah, there's a report in Politico this morning today, too, talking about a lot of what you mentioned there, this idea that Ted Cruz and his super PAC backing him have these ads, these anti-Rubio ads ready to go. They have offices ready to go in Florida. They've been sending signals that they may make an all-out push down there in Florida. And certainly on the stump, Ted Cruz has been saying he wants Marco Rubio out of this race. He wants a one-on-one with Donald Trump. You're saying, though, you think what they're doing in Florida is a head fake. What's the reason that they would have for doing a head fake like that?
Well, obviously to try to undermine our campaign. Look, Ted Cruz knows that if Marco Rubio wins Florida, which I believe we will do, that we are on pace to winning the nomination. The map gets much more favorable for Marco after March 15th. There are not going to be any more small rural caucuses that Ted Cruz has shown that he can win. Instead, we move to big states, more urban areas, suburban areas, a lot more swing states, states that Marco Rubio has shown that he can do well in, and that Ted Cruz has underperformed in. Remember, we beat Ted Cruz in Virginia. We beat him in South Carolina. We beat him in Nevada. We beat him in Minnesota. We beat him in Georgia, a state that Cruz actually thought he could win. Once we get past March 15th, the map gets much more favorable for Marco. And here's the other truth, Steve. If Marco wins Florida, which I believe he will, when we win Florida, then no candidate will be on the trajectory to securing the 1237 delegates needed to win the nomination. The odds of a contested convention become much higher after March 15th.
But let me ask you about that then. If that's what we end up with, if nobody gets the majority in the primaries and you have this contested convention you're talking about, would it be possible, would it be acceptable, do you think, for a candidate who does not emerge with with a plurality of delegates from the primary process, somebody who comes in second or third, which is what you right now would be on course for, to at that convention leapfrog the person who got the most delegates? Because that person, presumably Donald Trump, would say that's a crime against democracy.
Yeah, I mean, let me get through the next couple of weeks here first. I mean, the convention isn't until July. Who knows what the state of the race will look like then? I can tell you there's certainly historical precedent for what you just described, but we're quite a ways off from that. Here's what I can tell you, Steve. Donald Trump cannot be the nominee of the Republican Party. It will be a disaster for our party in November, not just because we would lose the White House and we would lose the majority on the Supreme Court, but we would lose the Senate. I believe we would lose the House. We would lose a lot of governors' offices and state legislatures around the country. It would be a loss of generational proportions that it would take a long time for our party to recover from. That cannot happen. That's why I'm asking all of your viewers, if you live in Florida, please go vote for Marco Rubio today. Vote, because he's the only one who can stop Donald Trump in Florida, and stopping Donald Trump in Florida is our best way to make sure that he is not the Republican nominee.
All right, Alex Conant, the communications director for Marco Rubio's campaign. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, and Senator Rubio is also going to be sitting down with Chuck Todd for an MSNBC Town Hall special. That's tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. You're not going to want to miss that. And after the break, we're going to turn to the Democrats in what has become a critical test in Michigan today for Bernie Sanders. I'm going to talk to his campaign manager next. But first, Hillary Clinton's final plea to voters in Michigan.
It's so important